Hello again. So we are now going to start shading and rendering setups. So let's give this guy a new name. Let's call it lesson 9, shading and rendering. Shading and rendering. So we obviously have quite a lot of cameras. Is this done? Now still rendering? Okay. So obviously we had a few cameras and we're gonna start with 2A. So in 2A we have, okay, so let's start building maybe our mantra nodes. I think that's a better idea. Okay, let's get rid of this guy. So let's create a mantra node per camera. So this one is 2A. Let's select 2A after creating a mantra. Let's give it a nice name, 2A. Oh. Okay, I am keep doing that. Okay, let's give this a good name. Cam 2A. Okay. Let's start with shot cam 2A, and the frame range for this camera is, as we here already decided a long time ago, 960 to 1080, and so we're gonna do one camera, and but maybe two where we see more objects. But let's start with 2A. So this one has our ship and our volumes. So what do we want? We want motion blur, obviously. We want a PBR renderer, and let's leave everything else by default. Let's lock on the camera and let's drag and drop. Okay, so I don't want to by accident leave any flag on to render something overnight that I really didn't want. So I'm gonna remove all the flags and wildcards, so this by default will render nothing. So what do I want? I need my ship, obviously. So let's go to, maybe let's put this back on auto. Let's hide. So for this shot I don't need the ground because I don't see it anyway, I think, right? It's never in the camera. So let's pick a good frame for our testing purposes. So I don't need the terrain. Well, no, actually I do, because I don't want, well, I don't want this terrain, I want the whole terrain. Why do I want terrain? Because I don't want my object to receive so much light from under, right? So this guy will block it. Ideally you can replace with a grid. So what do I want? I want force object as my ship, and I want my lights to be on. But for this to work, we can do another setup called bundle list. So a bundle list creates some list of objects in a container where we can define, so instead of writing all the objects in the forced objects or candidate object section, we can use the bundles. So I want a lighting bundle, so I'll call this my environment lights, and while these two guys are selected, I can add my environment lights. So now instead of in the light section, instead of going one light at a time, let me copy this guy, and then I can say force lights at environment lights. This becomes a bundle light, and now it will automatically use only these lights. And if you have like 20-30 lights, obviously it's going to make a huge difference because it's going to be so much easier to manage. And then we have our environment objects, but for now it's only the settlement which we don't see. So terrain which we have but we don't see in the scene. So I'm just going to put it as a force phantom, so it's going to block the light. It's going to cast shadows if there's any light source coming from under. So let's keep the volumes out for now, and let's do a little test render from mantra shot 2A, shot cam 2A. What we can do, let's go half res, just so we can have a just so we can see what will render. Okay, so this is a good frame. Let's hit render. Just wait for a second. This is going to now start rendering. Okay, so this looks right, but we are missing a shader, so we need to create a nice shader for this guy, and I'm going to launch another Houdini. File open. I want to implement a procedural shader for this tutorial, so which I have done previously, which is called the ship look dev. And if we go into our object, which is not finding it, so let me update the path. It should be under simulation all geo ship01.bgo under ship01.bgo. Okay, if we look through the test camera, okay, let's switch to render view. Let's hit render while this is on preview render. Okay, and let's switch to material network. So I can show you what is this meant to do. Okay, let's hide the sky. Select the environment light, render light geometry off. Okay, so what I can do also is that I can switch to another scene view here. Okay, let's go like this, and let's render scene view 2. Out network. Maybe bring this guy to a lower quality. And okay. So if I get closer now, it should update. Okay, so how do we design somehow reasonable shader for this guy? If I switch to material network, I'm going to pause this render. So we have our UVs, and we're creating we're bringing a UV, and we're creating a turbulent noise. If I drag and drop this over my render view and hit render, I should get only how this noise is supposed to look like. So based on the UV size, we've got some we're literally watching the raw noise on this guy, which has no lighting at the moment. And then we have this occlusion shader, which you can drop, and it's then going to give us some kind of mask where we can use to shift colors, right? And in this scene you will be able to play with this materials. So then basically I am refitting this, I'm reversing it, so then I get a mask for where there's occlusion, now I assume there's dust, there's scratches, etc. And I'm multiplying this with my noise. So if I drag and drop it on top of my object, then actually let me do this so we can do something comparable. Let's maybe focus on this area, and I'm going to make a snapshot out of this, and then I'm going to show you before and after. So it's kind of multiplied in certain areas, and now what I'm doing is that I'm bringing random colors from this object, which I created by using connectivity. I create a grayscale values to break up the shading. It is literally using the connectivity. So let's have a look at that. If we go obj geo, this information has already been baked based on CD. So we can, I'm just going to recreate that now. Attribute wrangle. No, okay, let's use maybe, let's do connectivity. And so this is going to create me a class value based on connected pieces, and then I can easily create a random color based on the class. So let's go point wop. Let's maybe clear the attribute delete. Let's maybe clean the any color information coming in here on the primitive level. So let's, and also let's change the connectivity's class connective type to primitive, so we have a primitive attribute instead of point. And let's change the point wop to run over primitives. And now we go inside, and then we can drop a random operator, and we can use our class attribute to generate a random value. But for that to work, we need to bring it in. So we can use a bind for that class, which is an integer. And now if I connect the class attribute to position, this 1D integer input will create a 1D output. So we say, let's say we want this to be color, and if I hook that up there and look through the viewport, this is gonna give me a random color per connected object, right? So, and then I can probably just say color correct, and I guess we can leave some color on maybe during down saturation. Okay, so maybe put 2, and now we have a variation among our pieces. Okay, and this is exactly what is already baked in this object, so it's up to you to play with it. Now let's go back to our shading exercise. Back to our shader. Oops. Material. So this is a classic shader, and I'm just plugging operators in a way. So this is where we were. This is our random colors, which we can absolutely generate in the shader itself. We definitely don't. We can bring all the attributes in here and redo all this coloration. And then I'm clamping some of these values that is a mix and match of occlusion and turbulent noise. So I'm never going full black, but gray, because I want some of these colors to be picked up, because I'm in the end I'm multiplying it. So then I multiply this with these random colors that I have. I'm also generating a red mask, like as if it's rust. And finally I get this color, okay, as my diffuse, and I hook that up to the diffuse color, and this goes into the reflection roughness, so it kinda ends up being something like this. Just drag and drop. This is really convenient. Okay, wait for it to, and obviously the shader model is adding reflectivity, etc., and the roughness and all that stuff, and then you have a little bit of your tinting here. So let's say you wanted to export some of this information. So how would you do that, right? You say, I'm really interested in having ability to maybe play some of these in post. So that's very easy. What we need to do, however, is we need to tell shader specifically what it needs to export. So I need to put a bind export here, and let's get the result of what we see in the viewport, and let's call this occlusion out, maybe occlusion raw, or I don't know. No, actually, let's plug this guy here, and let's call it occlusion raw, OCC. Let's call it OCC without moving the mouse. OCC. Okay. So now this is going to be exported. When input is connected, I can say always also. This still won't work because then the shader will export this, but Mantra needs to make it accessible. And for this to work, we need to go in Mantra's image section, go to extra image planes, hit this plus button, and write exact same name we wrote in the shader, so which was OCC. So what OCC, it is a vector, so now we have the raw output, and what we need to do is that we can write here, we can give it a good name, occlusion, and you probably want to export this out into a different name. So let's say what I want to save this, I'll say, let's say ship look dev, ship look dev, and maybe I want to have this to go something like ideally you would probably say $OS, which is the name of the mantra, and then let's say this will be primary because this will be the beauty, and we will say probably just a $f4.exr, and you can then copy this, paste this guy here, but this time instead of primary we can probably say, let's get this guy here, occlusion. So this is now going to export this out into a different file, and this is better in terms of networking, because instead of using a 400 megabyte EXR file that has 25 passes in it or whatsoever, that a compositor will probably use, let's say, 4 out of all. So if all this is separated, it will be much easier on the network, and even though EXRs are memory accessible, there is still an overhead. So now we have a custom output, right? So let's go maybe grab another one, and then you have your already built-in outputs like combined lighting, and then I can also say if I don't want this, let's say I want combined lighting per light, I can go combined lighting per light, and if I hit render again, let's put the render flag on the shader, because that's the only guy who's doing lighting calculated. Let's wait for it for a second. Okay, so if I now click here, I have a skylight, and I have a sunlight, and I have my occlusion, and I think I want to export my, I think this is the guy that I want to export with the red rust. No, it's not this one. No, it's this one. It's just Yeah, here. Okay, and let's call this guy maybe bind export. Let's call this Rust. So maybe you can change the color of it in post. If you want red, if you want a bit, I don't know, blue, whatever. So let's call this guy, we call it Rust. Is it? No, it wasn't Rust. Well, it was Rust. Okay, maybe it's because it needs to be a vector, because the color after all. Out, let's go out. It's Rust, it's a vector. Let's hit render again. Let's see if it's gonna show up. Okay, so we have the Rust as a separate pass. We have our occlusion as a separate pass, and now we can just do things. We can export the reflections the regular way, so we have all these information. What do we need? We need, let's say, combined lighting per component instead, and let's ideally bring back the put back the shader on the object, and let's go back to comp color. So this is our beauty, right? So we have the diffuse color, which is literally this guy going in, and we have under the reflections, we don't have any coat here, we don't have reflection, we don't have any volume, we don't have any SSS, but we do have Rust, mask, we have the lights separated, and we have occlusion as well. So this way you can get all the separate passes. Then you have your depth pass, normal position pass. Very, very handy in a lot of situations to add noise, to add to make depth of field. For relighting you need the normals, so on and so forth. So this file will go under the project folder, which is here, ship look dev. I'm gonna save this. Now I can close this, and obviously you if you need to do your own thing. Oh, here I almost skipped that one. This one is a primitive attribute where that's why we have this guy's brighter here. Do I have a better render? I'm not sure. Let's like this. This is where you put a value of 0 to 1 and then plug it in to emit intensity and emission color as you wish. So you get this, if this was completely lit, dark scene, these guys will be still bright. Well, let's change maybe this is not what it's rendering. Anyway, so this would be your ship shader. You can play with this. You can go crazy. There are patterns that creates shapes, rings, boxes to create your own solutions. And then there's the, what was that new noise? Turbulent noise. I forgot its name. Maybe it's in the lockdown. No, that was a new noise. I'm not sure. I think it was under the patterns. No, these are for pixel shaders. Here, pattern, wired pattern. No, I am not sure. That was the, you know, they introduced the new noise. Or maybe it's here. Periodic turbulent unified noise static. No, it's not here. Also, it's somewhere else. It's like it has more like a sci-fi kind of look. I don't remember the name of it. There's so many nodes. Okay, I'm sure if you wanted, you could find what's new in the documentation. Anyway, so yeah, ideally this would be a base for your shader, for at least for your ship. So I'm gonna close this one now and get back to the volume shading. So we have our ship, and now we need to take a look at our volume. Our render nodes section is at the base here. So mountain tip render, mountain debris render, we need to bring in the ship smoke. Let's create a new geometry node. Call it ship smoke delayed load. That's what I'm gonna name it. And all my render nodes are going black. Come on. And let's get the path that we cached out already. So that would be under ship smoke, and this is our cache. So let's get the path. And if we put this on auto, it will load our volume. And now we need to obviously get a material for this. So let's go basic smoke for now. And let's assign the shader to our object, which is under now material, basic smoke. And let's call this maybe shot to a column long smoke. Let's call it long smoke. Trail smoke. Okay. Just trail smoke. Okay, so now obviously we need to see what is going to render. Except we need to get this guy out, because we're gonna have for each camera we are going to create new elements. So our volume needs to cast shadow on our objects. So we can use our volume object as a phantom object on top of our cam2a, let's go underscore ship. Okay, so if I render this now, it's going to come out a little bit more darker, because it's going to be receiving shadow from the volume object. So let's wait for it to cook. Start rendering. Okay. Yes. Which means now we need to copy paste this guy and call it shotcam2a volume. And why am I doing this? Because you don't need so much. Well, I mean, it is always advisable to have majority of these elements rendered separately, because you may be happy with one and not happy with the other. So why waste render cycles re-rendering the whole thing? So now for the volume, I'm going to do the opposite, but since we are not utilizing deep rendering due to file size and this being a regular tutorial, we're going to use forced maths instead. So now I'm going to render the volume with ship being a force math object with the same lights, so I can do A over B, A being the smoke, B being the ship. So if I render this, no, sorry, from the top, change it to a volume, it's exactly the same camera. Let's do heat render. Now we're gonna play with our shader, so we need to go to our shader, which is trail smoke. So we should get a big thick smoke here. Actually, we have to play with the fire and everything. At the moment it doesn't have anything. And quite noisy render, obviously. So this is quite dense. I suggest dialing down the density, but there's a better way to do that. So let's go to our ship smoke So we are able to read everything. So let's go back to geometry specialist, lock this guy, and go into the primitive mode, and go under the intrinsics, go show volume max value. So we're going to see some values here to see what is our range. So we have a range of 20 density and 10 temperature. So what we can do in our shader is that we can remap these values. So under the smoke field, there's a fit the range. So your source is actually ranging from 0 to 20. So if I render this, now it's, the alpha is going to look so much more different. Because now we are literally normalizing the whole range from 0 to 1. And then we can probably have a better play on what we should be doing. Obviously, since it's much less dense now, a lot more noise gets introduced and render slows down because transparent volumes are more problematic. And possibly there are some other renderers, although limited by other means, sometimes are more favorable for such renders. So best way to test this shading is to speed this up is to turn off environment lighting. That's kind of like the slowest. Okay, I have a memory. It's just not responding. Come back. Okay. I'm going to kill this render. I'm going to turn off my environment lighting for a while, and I just want my sun to work. So let's select this guy. Let's go out to mantra and just say render just sun. If I hit render again, I'm just going to see the sun. That should render faster. Back to our object. Our shader. Okay, so this is how, well, it does make a lot of difference, but in terms of speed, but obviously the quality goes down quite a lot as well. So maybe I don't want this to be this thin anyway, so now I can boost my final scale maybe 5 times. Now this should give me a thicker volume around here and everywhere. Okay. This is still my, I'm still not using any kind of temperature here. So let's introduce this as well. So we only have the temperature, which is at level 9 at the moment. So maybe if it the range, I don't know, 9, maybe 8, and possibly the same for this here. And let's go back to the general and let's hit render. I think we need to really boost this up somewhere around here to actually start reading values that are hot enough. Okay, we get some tint. Let's go, I don't know, 4. Or we can also, let's go 2 by 2 as well. Because this thing is all on fire, right? Okay, this was our fire. Let's bring down maybe our range. We want strong fires maybe. It's gonna go, I think, really bright now. Okay, so now this is without any fire being contributed onto the volume. So what we can do is that let's create a volume light this next to this guy. So let's kill this. Now this is a true render time killer. As our object is selected, we click on it and then it should switch to the viewport, and then it should give you a volume light. So now if I go to mantra and even kill this light and say just render the volume light, so we can see how this is looking in comparison to normal light. But I'm gonna suggest something here. Select your volume light, give it a name, fire, smoke, and point cloud is turned on. I would say, well, since we are at home, but on a typical farm you may have to give an absolute path, but because we're on a home machine, this is gonna work fine. This is gonna use the shader to create some kind of light onto the smoke, since we don't have any lights, but this we're only going to see now what is contributing to this volume. At first it generates a point cloud and then uses it to light the volume and the surrounding objects. So let's wait for this to cook and start rendering. Now it's going to be a bit slower, and if maybe I think we can see the result mostly here much better. So we're going to see some bleeding, obviously. Okay, let's boost this up, and then actually let me kill this render, and then we most likely want this out so we can further improve it in comp. So you go to extra image planes and go combine lighting, no sorry, add plus combine lighting per light. So if I hit render again, remember we are still rendering half res with fairly low sampling, so it is a job for a farm, obviously, or a very patient TD at home. Let it cook. We'll start rendering. And now we can isolate our, so this is our, maybe it's a bit too strong. Yeah, probably we went a little over the top with the intensity. Okay, so maybe bring it down to 220. But I mean, that's kind of how it's done for the volume itself. I'm just gonna let it go, and then we need to do something else. We need to take this right and edit in the ship geo, so which I'll show you now, because that's going to get the contact areas much hotter, and when you do A over B, this is gonna work so much better in this way. And ideally you probably also want to improve the bounce, so putting the diffuse limit to 1 and the volume limit to 1 is going to slow down your renders quite a lot, but increase the visual quality even more. Okay, so we have a volume lit by its own fire field, and this will be the beauty. This will be, yeah, okay, that's looking so much better now. It looks like it's really badly damaged, on fire. And okay, so this is literally what we are seeing with 0 other lights, because we don't get any contribution here. Okay, so I'm gonna stop this, and then I'm gonna put the other 2 lights back on, so we have a constant light. Where was it? Objects. Okay, so let's save this, let's hit render. Just wait a little bit. Oh, excuse me, it's a bit late. Okay, waiting for first buckets to show up. So now it's fire and smoke, but this is too bright smoke. I want dark smoke, so maybe we also should go to our volume shader and bring this guy to something much darker, like I don't know, 0.1 possibly. Oops, maybe let's go to presets. Okay, let's maybe start rendering from here. I think we're seeing the contribution of the fire. Let me see, this is the HDRI, okay, this is the sun, and this is the fire smoke. No, okay, I think it didn't pick up the color. Let's bring this down a bit more, I'll say. No, this should work. Do I have any other thing here? No, okay, let's try again. Okay, waiting for it. Okay, now I think it's working. It's darker. This will probably work better on a brighter background. Okay, let's go a little bit further. Okay, our light. Okay, on a darker smoke, I think we can go brighter emission. So probably we can increase the contribution amount from our volume light. But now if you focus on this area, let's focus on this area. If you focus on this area, and if I go back to my ship from the same camera, if I hit render, now we're gonna get bright areas. So when we put the smoke and fire on top of the ship, it's gonna just sit on each other much better. There's not gonna be harsh edges, and this is what we're after. Let's wait for it. Okay, now obviously if you put the fire on top of this, this would work much better instead of this. And this is ideally how you would render this sequence out. You would merge these guys and maybe give it a null and say cam, what is this, 2A, shot cam, oh come on, shot cam 2A, and this guy, say maybe node by node, so it finishes one, moves to the other one. In the morning you have your renders for comping, and we don't need the background here, we don't need the ground, sorry, and this is how I would render this. Obviously you probably would want to go, I mean, if we pick a frame like this on this guy, and you probably want to go diffuse limit 1 and volume limit 1, maybe volume limit 0 for starters because it's really slow. Let's go 4x4, ideally increase the stochastic samples to maybe something like 16, and this should give fairly reasonable render. But sorry, we forgot something. You always want to render with motion blur, and under sampling make sure you turn on geometry velocity blur. An animated chip doesn't need that because it's already knows where it's going based on this key transform. Unless it has a deformation that is happening inside, then you would have to turn on geometry motion blur, geometry velocity blur. So let's do. We were gonna increase this also to 2. Let's go 1 for now. And if I try to render this section, I'm not on ship but on volume, I think this time we're gonna get a slower but a much nicer looking render. So let's wait. So now next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna duplicate this, paste it down, do the other volume, duplicate this, paste it down, do the final volume, and then we're gonna do the same thing for the mountain tip render, mountain debris render, and the base render. So it is rendering, and if I go back, the stochastic samples are going to improve the noise quite a lot. Okay, let's check our fire to smoke. Okay, so this is really not that strong, so let's really boost that up. Let's go 4:2 and let's render this section. Because we brought the color of the smoke down, and since it's now black smoke, it's probably absorbing a lot of light, so that's why we're not seeing much. So we compensate that by increasing the intensity and exposure, so it's gonna come out brighter now. Still doesn't seem to be strong enough, but brighter. Well, okay, let's go 10:4. I think now it's going to start putting some more detail in there. Okay. Alright. So I would put this on a low res overnight render to see what values I want to play with. Bring it in After Effects or Nuke. Nuke is my favorite, and do your tests. And even then, if you don't have either, you can always use where's the composite view, and there's a preset here, I believe, image. Houdini's compositor is pretty good, pretty strong. It works. It's designed to work with Houdini, so it's very well integrated. Although I don't use it because I'm not used to it simply. So let's copy these guys now, and let's give it a mountain smoke, and let's call it DL, mountain smoke DL, and this one is not fiery, so it doesn't need the fired smoke, but it's on its own shader. So let's go to material view, let's call it RBD smoke, and this one has no fire whatsoever and doesn't need the temperature field. And let's remove the fit first. Let's maybe give it a bit of a more brownier color. Let's make it maybe darker. Okay, let's go maybe something like that, but much darker maybe. I'm not sure. No, you know what? Let's just start with a bit of brighter gray. Okay, let's now assign this to its material properties, RBD smoke, and let's find the cache as well, which is here. Okay, you will have to adjust these values obviously. So this guy now is the other shot. So one thing we're gonna do, is to go back in ship smoke DL. We did our test, we know where our object is. Now we can safely change the missing frame to no geometry and load it as packed disk and bounding box. So this is just going to load the bounding box. Although it's just a box, it will render properly. And since our object is forced object on both of our mantra nodes, forced math and forced phantom and forced object, we can literally turn this off from the viewport and it will still work. Now let's update the path for the mountain smoke, and let's go and find the proper frame range for it, which is, I believe, something like this we can use. Okay, so this guy is gonna need, again, at least 3 mantras. It is going to have shot 3 can ship, shot 3 volume, oops, shot 3 volume. So there are plenty of elements we made for this. So this, one of them is the mountain smoke RBD, and then we can, let me put this back in pack disk mode. I can turn this off now. We're gonna set this up properly, and then I did additional effects for this, which was the particle cache, which the rocks that we had here. Did we cache this out? Apparently we did. No, this is not this one, sorry. We have the copy to points. So let's call this now. Let's call this rocks. Okay. Let's bring them here. Mountain smoke DL1, mountain rock. Let's call this rocks. Dive inside. Drop in an object merge, lock it up into this object, go back to mountain tip RBD, drop the rocks in here, and also we have the mountain debris which we're gonna use. So copy paste this guy again, let's call it mountain debris, delayed load. This time we can just load that back, file, and sorry, go back in to where we dropped the file, yeah, look it up, and back to mountain tip RBD. Let's get this path, starting from 1076, and drop it in here. Okay, so now we have the points, the rocks, the smoke, and we're missing the RBD itself. So let's bring that in as well. I guess we can just use this to be copy pasted. Let's call it mountain RBD DL, and now if we go inside, we can delete this because we're doing transform pieces, so we're going to do an object merge, and object merge, and we should then go inside our mountain tip RBD and find our RBD cache, which is this guy, comes in here. Okay, and so let's turn these guys off for now and go one step at a time. Oh, and we need the trees. We need the trees, which we are going to, I guess we can just directly use from vegetation. Maybe I should have turned that on. Let's wait and see what it does. Which is taking a while. Let me monitor my memory, which is okay now. Oh, it's taking a while. Okay, so wait a bit more. Oh, there are the trees. Okay, so we have the trees. These are not in the air, they're resting on our other geo. Let's turn it off. So let's go out network and let's start building our maybe environment. Actually, we can probably put the environment at the back. Now let's just make it a bit more simplistic. Let's not make it more difficult. Okay, so shot 3 ship. Ship will need to have, which we're not going to call it ship, we're going to call it environment for now, or we're going to call it geo. Okay, so let's call it geo, and then let's say we want the ship, we want the terrain, and we want the trees. So let's get the vegetation here out. Okay, and then we also want the rig. And we also want the RBD. Or we can use the bundles. So let's create a bundle. Let's say shot 3 geo. So what do I need? Again, obj, I need these 3 guys. You can drag and drop them. And I want the vegetation and the hills. So it's going to run the debris, RBD, rocks, hill, and vegetation. So let's save this scene. Out. So okay, we don't need fire to smoke. We do want environment lights. So if we go to render view, now if you select the property camera, which is shot 3 and shot 3 geo, and if you wait, we will see our objects coming to life, but that's gonna look weird because we have to take care of a lot of things, like removing the volume shader from the geometry. Well caught. Okay. This needs to be disappeared. This needs to be disappeared. And okay, this is not in there. This is not in there. We will need to adjust the point size of the there with the rocks, which was this one. So let's go one at a time. That's easier. Cut. I'm gonna remove the smoke for now as well, and render the ship. Okay. So ship is working. It seems to me that the volume, yeah, there's motion there. Oh, because the camera is following. Obviously, to fix the noise, there are a few ways. We can always increase, I think it's the diffuse quality now global. Before we increase samples, let me try. This doesn't do anything because it's kind of helped. What if you go decrease the noise level? It did kind of help, and I think after this we really need to maybe, because it's a very simple shader also. I guess we can go 4x4. Probably increase the samples of the light one notch. Okay, let's save this so we can compare. A little bit better. Not so much slower too. Oh, we're not using really a proper shader, but still a little bit of improvement. Okay, so that's one. Now let's bring in maybe the RBD. So objects, mountain RBDDL. Make sure These are all gonna be gray because I have a shader for it. Okay, that's working. We obviously need to bring in the ground. Wait for it. And populate it. Okay, and then we need to bring in our vegetation. But before vegetation, I want to see how the, so let's bring in the rocks. Actually, I'm gonna cut all this. I want to try debris DL because these are just points. Debris DL, and we're just gonna play overall size from the point scale, which we can give them individual point sizes. So it's kind of look just like sand, not too small, not too big. That's fine. Let's keep that, and let's go back here. Let's paste everything else back, and if we now do render, I think this is everything. So it's the points, the land, the ship, the rocks, the mountain. Where is the vegetation? Is not here. That's not the missing thing. So let's get the vegetation as well. And mountain debris render, smoke DL, tip RBD, vegetation. Except kill the render, object level. I think this is what we wanted to do, but I guess we can discard these. Okay, let's hit render and let's wait. So obviously now the memory usage is increasing, the file size are increasing, the time for render is increasing, but now we have a much richer image with trees and particles, although we don't have shaders because our lesson is not to focus on creating photorealistic image in this tutorial at least, but kind of pave the way to get an effect like that if we had more time, obviously. But creating a video to this extent in given time frame is quite to this quality at least is quite normal. It literally takes weeks and sometimes months to create, and quite like tens of artists to create amazing looking visuals in the VFX industry, because we have texture specialists, we have modeling specialists, our models are so much higher quality, our artists are so much talented, so it does take dedication, it does take a lot of hard work to get these shots out of the door appropriately to the quality level that is requested from us, and it does take a fair bit of work to have something reasonably pretty. So this is pretty much all we can achieve in around 12 hours, I think, or 13 hours of video that we have been spending together. And obviously on my end this is so much more than 12 hours or 13 hours of work that has been put into this tutorial. Now I assume what I would do if I were in your shoe is to do this tutorial maybe one more time, and then start laying out your own short exercises that what I have been doing here. Like I said in the previous videos, there's literally, I would say, tens of ways to even just scatter points on in Houdini. My advice is always start with the shelf tools. The shelf tools were not just some presets, but literally sophisticated tools created by SideFX, which makes the necessary connections out of the box, so you don't have to struggle through between these choices. And so while we're going, we can also select all these. So obviously we need to then get this mountain smoke. We didn't touch this yet, right? Let's do that as well. Let's go in here. So we want to do render now mountain smoke, and this needs its own shader, which we did here, RBD smoke. Okay, is it assigned? Where is it? Shape smoke, mountain smoke, RBD smoke, which is assigned. And let's go back to, let's say, this image. Okay, it is getting somewhere. I wonder if we can, we probably need to get that light. Oh, not copy, because we have a fire here also. So maybe that is lighting this, and it is lighting that other volume. And we probably want ship smoke to be phantom on the environment as well, so it's gonna light it. And then we also want the mountain smoke to be a phantom here as well, and ideally this is what we want to render here as well, animated ship. We then want all of these to be math. Okay, let's see. Well, I'm talking about the what you guys can continue to do. Wow, this is gonna be a slow render now. Okay, so as I was saying, there are many ways. So always start with the shelf tool. If you, I mean, in these lessons we didn't, because I wanted to show you the way that it's not very complicated. And but if you're not comfortable enough, it's perfectly fine to start with the shelf tools. Most of the time I start my rigs with the shelf tools, because it avoids me to make complicated complex setups at the beginning. Eventually the rigs get quite complex, no matter how simple we try to keep them. When you get your task, try to approach the problem by dividing it into smaller sections, and try to move one step at a time forward. Do not worry about the initial look of your simulations at the very first frames, at the very first dailies. Aim for the create yourself milestones. First I'm going to achieve this, and then I'm going to make it a bit higher scale, a higher quality, and then add additional detail. And then I'm going to go for the secondaries. I'm going to add the debris, I'm going to add the particles. It is always easier to manage a shot like this, and this is what I most of the time advise as well. Okay, so I think for this shot our fire to smoke is a bit stronger, I would say. So I guess you can create another light for this, and just bring down those values. So maybe something like this, I guess. I'm not sure. So it just lights a little bit around, but not as much, because this is a bit too much. And it's probably going quite far in terms of emission distance. All the trees are on fire. Yeah, it's a bit way too much, let's say. Let's try the volume render. And yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. So I guess that's it. And it has been a truly great experience for me for putting my first tutorial. I hope it's going to help you a lot in your next tasks, and thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to send me an email, and hopefully I'll be coming back with more tutorials in 2018. And thank you very much for watching.